Madam Clerk, do we have the rest of the members out there looking for Commissioner Preston?
We're just waiting for Commissioner Preston.
Okay.
Vice Mayor Parnes looks like he's on. He just needs video.
Okay.
Switch to active speaker.
Mr. Preston coming back?
We're calling him right now.
I can have, I see the volume, but my picture's not on and I don't know why. I'm in the upper left-hand corner of the screen. Can anybody hear me?
Heather, can we please? Yes, Commissioner. Yes,
can hear you.
Okay.
Commissioner Parnas, we can hear you.
That's the most important thing.
Okay.
There we are. Okay. I'm here.
We're just waiting for Commissioner Preston.
Anthony, where'd you get the haircut?
At a legally permissible location.
Okay. Me too.
North of the border.
Commissioner Preston is trying to connect now.
Okay. Heather, how close are we with Commissioner Preston?
CRA is sending him a request right
There
now
we
to
go.
start his video. And once he clicks on it, there he is.
There we go. All right, perfect. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, we'd like to call to order the Community Redevelopment Agency meeting for May 12th, 2020. Will you please have roll call?
Mr. Drosky,
Here.
Mr. Hudak,
Here.
Mr. Preston. Can you unmute him, please? Mr. Preston,
Here.
Vice Chair Parnes,
Here,
Chair Gans.
Here.
Okay.
If we could have a pledge of allegiance. Pledge of allegiance to the flag of the
flag,
United States of
United States
America,
of America,
to the republic
States.
and one nation
under God,
under God, indivisible, with liberty
Under
and for all.
and justice.
Indivisible. Liberty and justice for all.
We have approval of the minutes for the Community Redevelopment Agency meeting minutes for March 10th, 2020.
Motion to accept?
Second.
Second.
Motion with the Vice Chair, second by Commissioner Preston. All in favor, say aye.
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 If we have approval of the Community Redevelopment Agency agenda for May 12th, 2020.
Motion to approve?
Second?
Motion by Mr. Preston, second by Vice Chair Parnes. All in favor, say aye.
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 Okay.
Item number 1 is a resolution of the Community Redevelopment Agency of the City of Deerfield Beach, Florida, confirming that Bernie Parnes shall be Vice Chair of the Board of the Deerfield Beach Community Redevelopment Agency, providing for an effective date.
Motion to approve.
Second.
I don't see anyone from the public speaking on this. Motion from, I'm going to close it to the public then. We'll have a motion by Mr. Hudak, second by Mr. Preston. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Okay.
Okay. Item number 2 is a presentation by Mermello Ajamil regarding the Hillsboro Boulevard Bus Stop Relocation Project.
Thank you, Anthony. This is Chris Maury, Director of the CRA. Good evening, Chair Gans, Vice Chair Parnas, and the rest of the CRA board. This evening, we have Joshua Rack with us from Bermeo Ajamil. Bermeo Ajamil is the group that is designing improvements to the area around the Royal Blues Hotel, including Hillsboro Boulevard. Mr. Rack is going to take you through a brief presentation of the project. This is mostly an update. However, at the end of Mr. Rack's presentation, he will be asking the board for some creative direction on the design of a bus shelter. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Rack.
Good evening. Just a quick check. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, Mr.
Hello?
Rack,
Yes.
please proceed.
Very, very low. Yes.
Very much. Good evening, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, CRA board members. My name is Joshua Rack. I'm a senior urban planner at Ajamil and Partners. And if you're not familiar, BNA is a full-service design and engineering firm headquartered down in Miami. We've done quite a few projects over the last few years with Chris and her team, and we're happy to be working again with the presently, we've been coordinating over the last few months with Chris and Mark and the CRA staff. We've coordinated with the city and Broward County Transit to analyze the feasibility of relocating the bus stop that's currently located at Northeast 20th Terrace, 1 block south to Hillsboro Boulevard and the beach. As we started reviewing the project and doing site visits and discussions with Chris and Mark, we started to kind of see the overall picture and identify different opportunities of what moving this bus stop or relocating this bus stop could provide for the city. We would have opportunities to create new streetscape features and facilitate the safe movement of people. We were going to take a look through this project of what happens with the on-street parking. Could we identify new areas for on-street parking or mitigate any on-street parking loss as a result of moving the bus stop? We would identify new pedestrian connections, sidewalks, and crosswalks to better provide safe passage for people into and out of this area. And we wanted to make sure that any improvements that we could make to the best extent possible were made with ADA accessibility in mind. So with that said, we had the pleasure of going on a site visit with Mark back in December or January. And we did a full planning level analysis of the land uses to understand the types of uses in the area that were bringing people to this area of the beach. We took a look at vehicular access throughout the area. How do cars move in and around this area, where they're parking, where they're stopping, dropping off. Took a look at the public transit connectivity in the area. This is a bus stop relocation, so we wanted to understand how the buses are accessing this area. And then probably besides the bus stop, the next most important thing was, how do pedestrians move around this area? Is it safe? Do people feel comfortable walking around this area? Are there ample sidewalks, crosswalks? So these are some of the things that we can kind of start to pinpoint as we take a look at this analysis. The map that you see right now is the kind of 4 or 5 identified improvement areas that we have keyed in on as a result of this preliminary analysis. So when you move the bus stop to the new area, it kind of opens the door for other improvements for the pedestrian mobility throughout this portion of the beach. Starting in the box labeled A, if you're familiar with the area on Northeast 20th Terrace, the lower right portion of the box, there's an existing bus stop. Presently, the bus stop is a single post sign in the shoulder, the paved shoulder. There's limited to no kind of landscape or pedestrian protection. And patrons of the bus just stand in the shoulder, bus pulls up, picks them up, and then they go about their way. If there happens to be 2 buses in the area, this area does serve as a bus queuing. So one bus will pull up to the stop, and then the other bus will queue shortly thereafter. By relocating the bus stop, we've been able to introduce some new features into the streetscape. So of those features, you can see in this map, the proposed improvements. We would pick up 5 new parking spaces, the addition of new landscape bulb outs with street trees, which aren't there right now, and then a new 6-foot sidewalk, the length of the south side of the street, which currently is just a paved shoulder. So once you relocate the bus stop, or if you decide to relocate the bus stop to the south side in this box labeled B or C, that's just west of the Hotel Royal Blues, you relocate that bus stop. We had a briefing meeting at Broward County Transit offices. They've collaborated with us. They've been very helpful in providing the standards for placement and size of the bus bay. Originally, we discussed including accommodations for 2 buses, a double bus bay. However, once we started laying out according to the size requirements for the bus bays, we realized quickly that was going to take up the whole length, and we would lose all of the parking spaces that were currently on the north side of East Hillsboro Boulevard. So this proposed plan does include just a single bus bay. We've coordinated with Broward County Transit, and they said that does meet their needs, and they're supportive of this project. In addition to the bus bay, something that the existing bus stop does not have is a covered bus shelter. So we will be looking to introduce a uniquely architecturally identifiable covered bus shelter at this area, which I'll go into a little bit of detail in the coming slides. Box letter D is the existing 10 parallel parking spaces along the north side of East Hillsboro Boulevard. Once we accommodate the requirements for the bus bay and the bus shelter, we do lose 6 of those parking spaces along the street. However, we're able to offset 5 of those by the introduction of the new spaces along Northeast 20th Terrace. So it is a net -1 parking space for this block. We've been able to mitigate that almost fully. And then the letter E on the west side of East Hillsboro, of this block of East Hillsboro Boulevard, presently there's some swale area that's been overrun. Cars are parking on top of the swale area. It's matted down grass. This is an important area for entrance into the beach. This is kind of a front door or gateway to the area. So to have kind of matted down grass and cars parked, not in parking spaces along this area isn't the best kind of first impression that we could offer to people coming to the beach and to the parking areas. So through this project, we were able to accommodate the curbing of a landscape swale along this sidewalk, additional street trees, canopied street trees, and then on the south side of the street, we've identified areas to improve and repair blemished or cracked sidewalks the whole length of East Hillsboro Boulevard. Next slide, please, Chris. So as part of the scope of work, we were tasked to come up with some concepts for a uniquely identifiable bus shelter for this new bus bay. This alternative that you see here is we're going to call it the pergola structure. Just taking a quick step back. Currently, Broward County Transit uses a bus shelter called the Kaleidoscope shelter. It's a shelter I'm sure most of you have seen. It's a black metal half dome or half vaulted roof with anchored benches and garbage cans. So through the process and working with them, and they assumed we would use the Kaleidoscope, but we've been working closely with Chris and Mark to come up with kind of an iconic, identifiable architecture piece that we could use for a bus bay. Our directive was to take a look at the surrounding context of the beach, most specifically the main pier, and follow the architectural style that's been established successfully in that area. So we're calling that kind of a traditional beach vernacular or Florida vernacular. You see a lot of the elements that you see in the beach architecture, we're trying to introduce into these different alternatives that I'm going to present to you today. You'll see a lot of metal columns with open pergolas, decorative shutter screening to protect people from the elements. We did get some advice from the CRA director that the stone clad base on a lot of the elements in the pier was not holding up to the best that they could be. So we were advised to stay away from that type of finish on these bus shelters, as these are heavily used shelters and we want to make sure that they're easy to maintain and appear their best. Some of the input that we received for this alternative that you see before you was that the open pergola is not a preference for this bus shelter just because of the Florida sun and then the Florida rain. So the preference was to have some kind of closed structure. And also this open pergola provided had some concerns that were expressed regarding bird nesting. So one of the negatives in addition to the open pergola was the fact that this one might attract birds to nest on top of the members. Next slide, please. So the second option is what we're calling kind of the standing seam metal roof. You'll see that we've introduced the same type of roofing material that you find at the pier. These have more of a nautical feel with a rounded profile on the columns, symmetrical columns, arranged in threes. We've shown or depicted a one-piece underside made of wood material. So this would kind of erase any concerns for birds or take away any opportunities for birds to nest in the bottom of the bus shelter. Unfortunately, some of the feedback received for this one was that the open shelter on the side is not preferred because of the sideways rainstorms that we get here in South Florida. So we go to the next slide, which is one that we're calling the hybrid alternative, which is kind of the best aspects of both of them. So the hybrid alternative is taking all of the elements that we like from the first two options and coming together with a coherent design. Of course, these are all ADA accessible. They incorporate the mandatory bus ramp areas into the station for covered wheelchair area. The shelters push to the edge of the right of way to maximize coverage, but still remain ADA compliant. And the cantilevered roof provides maximum protection along the sidewalk for patrons of the bus, but also is set back far enough away from the edge of the pavement so that the bus mirrors don't clip the bus shelters. Next slide, please. So these are some three-dimensional views of the hybrid bus shelter. You'll see the same metal columns with timber wood structure and designed rafter tips protruding out the end of the standing seam metal roof. There's an enclosed underside that discourages birds nesting. And then we introduced the same shuttered enclosure from Option 1, only this time we've put in a panel for signage so the city and the CRA can put signage announcements or bus route announcements in this panel. And it incorporates a lean-to bench rather than a full sit-down bench. We found that these are becoming quite popular in bus shelters that don't want to provide permanent seating. It discourages people from hanging around the bus shelter if they're not waiting for the bus. So these are quite comfortable, and they give you the opportunity to introduce a little pop of color or some sort of branding for the city and the area with a green lean-to bench. Next slide, please. Lastly, as part of the analysis, we understand that the CRA has been directed to kind of start exploring through a lot of their projects now, exploring undergrounding of utilities. This is the condition along East Hillsboro Boulevard. So as part of this efforts, we had a full detailed cost estimate that was conducted for the projects that I just presented to you. Next slide, please. And what's called the base bid is the map of the 5 projects that I outlined in the first slide. So the detailed cost estimate revealed a cost of $422,665. And as an alternative, we did another estimate, an alternate cost estimate that included the undergrounding of the overhead utility lines that were depicted in that previous slide. And if the CRA elected to go with that option with the underground utilities, the cost would be $524,263. So with that, I'd like to take an opportunity to thank you and turn it over to you to, if you have any questions or comments, I'm available to answer them and provide any details that you might be interested in. Thank you.
Okay. Anything to add? Ms. Maury, do you have anything to add? You're on mute, Ms. Maury.
Thank you, Chair Gans. I don't have anything to add at this time. I see that there are hands raised by the board. I thought maybe I'd listen to the input from the board before I offered any staff comments.
I think there's some bad sound coming from, looks like it might be, looks like it's stopped. Okay, Mr. Hudak.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I definitely like the hybrid option and would definitely be in favor of undergrounding of the utilities. The only question I would ask and the only addition that I would recommend is the installation of trash cans. We've seen, the lack of trash cans over by Little Harbor at that bus station being a constant issue, and something so close to the beach. I think it's important that trash cans are incorporated into the design, just to keep it as sanitary as possible. That would be my only suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And the cost estimate does include, we did include a trash can that's the same design character so that it matches the lean-to bench and then the architecture of the station. So the cost estimate did include provisions for a trash can.
Thank you. Mr. Drosky.
Thank you, Chair. First question is for Mr. Rack. Are there any improvements to East Hillsboro Boulevard itself or just the swale areas? Because when you are on East Hillsboro between Ocean Way and A1A, it gets a little wavy, or it's kind of like a roller coaster going through there. Is there any plan to regrade that particular area, or is it just the swale areas that we're talking about?
Yes, the cost estimate does include, and that's the base bid does include the regrading of the roadways. So you'll have a completely new roadway surfaces, new curbing in certain areas that we spoke about on the side, the new swale areas, landscaping. So it's going to be a whole new roadway, new striping, the works.
Okay. And then my second question is for Director Maury. If we went with the undergrounding of the utilities, which I support as well, for 524,000, how does that fit into our projects and our budgets? Where does that fit into the grand scheme of things? I didn't bring that with me this evening, so can you refresh my memory, please?
Actually, Board Member Drosky, we could talk about that as part of the next item, if you wouldn't mind. I have included it, the cost of both of these project options in our upcoming discussion of capital priorities for next year.
Okay, great.
Vice Chair Parnas.
Yeah, it's kind of a plain design and it's in a beach area. You think maybe we could put some fish on top of it or seagulls or something in a design to make it look more friendly? It's just a plain box.
Board Member Parnas, the only thing I would say about that is that Joshua didn't really emphasize it, but we have had a lot of participation from the owners of the Royal Blues Hotel. And if it's not apparent to you, this false shelter also is a very strong match to the Royal Blues Hotel. So we're trying to not detract from the high quality that they have in their architecture. If we got too branded in terms of fish or that kind of thing, it might detract from that look.
If I may add, Chris, the simplicity of the volumetric design of the bus station is a direct response to the requirements for ADA. So we are limited by ADA accessibility, not only within the station, but through the station. So that is why we had to push it all the way to the right-of-way line. And where it meets the ground, we're very limited to the amount of structure that can actually hit the ground, because we do need to maintain that thoroughfare for ADA accessibility.
I have a couple points to make. One, I will say this, it almost seems as if the presentations that were presented were so slanted towards one choice that I don't know what the point of some of the other options even being on the list. I guess I'm a little confused. Is the base bid, is that for suggestion A, or is that for what appears to be a completely maxed out option C? Does that mean that that price tag goes up depending on which option we pick?
So the base bid includes option, the price for option C. The purpose of the presentation was to kind of present two different options, and then we had a preliminary meeting with Chris and Mark and city staff to kind of vet a couple of those options, and then received feedback, and that's how we arrived at the hybrid option that you were presented today.
Okay, so this is really just you're presenting one option, but you're showing the evolution of the decision making?
Yes, sir, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone from the public that wanted to comment on this item? Do we have anyone that is mailed in, Miss?
No, we do not.
Okay. I don't see anybody from the public raising their hand. I'm going to close it to the public commission. Any further comments, or we're looking for a motion?
I'd like to make a motion to approve to include the undergrounding of the utilities.
We have a motion by Mr. Hudak.
You have a second?
We have a second by Vice Chair Parnas. We have roll call, please.
Mr. Drosky,
Yes.
Mr. Hudak,
Yes.
Mr. Preston,
Yes.
Vice Chair Parnas,
Yes.
Chair Gans.
Yes.
Item number 3 is a presentation by staff regarding the mid-year accomplishments.
Ms. Moore?
Thank you, Chair Gans. I didn't take the opportunity when we first started the meeting, but I just wanted to take a minute to let you know how nice it is to see all of you. I haven't seen most of you in 2 months. So I know it's really nice for me to see you. And I apologize if we're not as smooth as the city clerk's office was with your commission meetings, but we're going to try to make it through this. So I will just kick it off. This presentation is our mid-year accomplishments report. So it accomplishes in basically everything that we've done through the end of March this year. And then for you seasoned board members, you'll recall that this is going to go into a discussion of our budget for next year to give me some direction on what priorities you'd like to see. And then a look at our capital improvements project that I just referenced in the last item. And planning for the next 5 years. That should be an interesting discussion given the times that we're working in right now. Next slide, please. So I always like to start this presentation, as you know, with a reminder to the board of how our the CRA budget's generally spent. This year, our budget is $6.3 million. 43% of that is going directly into capital improvements projects. 18% of it is going into debt service, which you know is an annual expense. And then 17% of that goes for professional services to support those design projects. And this is just our tax increment revenue. Next slide, please. We also this year are spending the last of our bond money that we had in our account with the construction of the Kirk Cottrell Pavilion. So when we put in the money from that bond, our overall budget became $7.6 million. You can see that. As usual, I'm going to point out to you that staffing is a very small portion of that. We do a lot of work with a very small staff of 2 full-time employees, half my time and half of the city clerk's time in this fiscal year. Next slide. So we're going to take you through a discussion of what we've been working on this past 6 months. Even though we've been dealing with COVID for the last, over 2 months now, just so proud of our staff and what they've gotten done in the last 6 months. And I can assure you that even if I included the first 8 months, including the COVID time, I just couldn't be more proud of them because they haven't missed a beat. They keep things going, even despite the fact that it seems like the world is so chaotic. Next slide. Our big project that we're working on right now, of course, is the Kirk Cottrell Pavilion. You've been seeing in your weekly updates progress pictures of the pavilion. I hope you've been enjoying those as we go through that project. Actually, you can just keep going through. You all were there when we had fun demolishing the old structure. It came down fairly quickly, actually. This is an interesting aerial view of the site once it was cleared, sitting right next to the putting green of Tierra East. You can also see how it's smushed right in, next to JB. So it's a real tight site to be working in. Dantos construction has been moving along fairly well, given what's been going on with worker supply and a slowing down of supply chains and items and in the construction process. And so you can see the building, the structure is completely finished. The roof is on. And actually, as of this week, they've been working on stucco and moving into the trades inside the building. This is another view of the building from the, obviously from the beach. So you're starting to really get a view of that wave design that you selected. In addition to Sullivan Park, or in addition to the Kirk Cottrell Pavilion, we've been working on Sullivan Park Phase 2 this past 6 months. And we got to a point in the project where we, have consensus finally at a preferred alternative for that project as well. You'll recall that we went through extensive public input with the public, first starting out at the Chamber of Commerce building, then moving to the Hillsboro Community Center for a preference survey. You'll recall also that staff went into the park with iPads. Thank goodness we did it then, because we certainly couldn't do that now to solicit public input. We did the surveys in person in the park, and we did surveys online as well to collect public input into this project. At the last discussion on Sullivan Park, the board was presented with 4 alternatives, ranging from complete green space where the existing Chamber of Commerce building is occupied by our staff right now, to a 1-story facility in alternative 2, a 2-story facility with parking underneath for alternative 3, and completely relocating the building to the east side of the property as alternative 4. Ultimately, and after much discussion, you'll recall that you selected alternative 2, which you're looking at now, which is roughly 1-story building with several different elevations, with outdoor patios, generous public meeting space, but still, of course, retaining adequate green space and making room also for an entryway feature and a monument at the corner of the location. Just as an update to that project, although it's not within the 6 months, I was informed yesterday that we got 10 responses to our request for qualifications for design firms to come in and take this building into full design. So there's an evaluation committee that's been formed. It's a committee that is comprised of different staff, city staff members, as well as 1 member from outside of the city. We asked Broward County Parks to participate in the evaluation of the design firms as well. So we will be getting expertise from Eric Westberg, who is the Director of Operations for Deerfield Island County Park. So that's Sullivan Park. And next accomplishment, of course, is the LED porthole. You've all seen that by now. These are some pictures of the project while it went from, on the right-hand side, concept into construction. And then the next photo, or the next slide, you'll see it in real life. This, the porthole is actually, we can control it remotely, and we can control it from in the pier bait check area. And it's set up to be a direct feed of the underwater camera. It's currently off because we don't have any patrons at the beach at this time. We put out the scope of services. We hired Ken Carlson to start taking a look at additional enhanced signage and wayfinding on the pier. So that work is underway as well. And we hope to bring something back to you in the months to come. So another larger capital project that we have underway right now is the pier observation deck expansion. You should also have been seeing progress pictures of this project in your weekly update. Ashley's going to go through to the next picture. So you can see actually where we're at right now. We did have to shut down the pier parking lot briefly. One of the support beams for this project is just huge. And so we had to bring a crane in to fly it into the site. Sometimes every cloud has a silver lining. The silver lining of the beach being shut down is that we got to start this project about 3 weeks early, and we were able to give the contractor ready access to the site. And so this project is really progressing quite quickly. It's also a lot safer, I believe, because there's not pedestrians or beach patrons in the construction area. It also helps that the restaurant is closed as well for that same reason. Another sign, another project that we have that's smaller in scale, because of the Kirk Cottrell Pavilion, the CRA kind of took a leadership role in starting to work with the different departments of the city staff to update the mishmash of beach regulation signs that are out on Ocean Way. And we've come up with a prototype that we're going to be using that basically condenses all of these different messages into one easier to read sign that's branded and has that Deerfield Beach look. We'll be installing those as part of Kirk Cottrell. And then the city will be installing those for the balance of the Ocean Way area that's not in the CRA. And then, of course, when we last spoke, the board authorized us to move forward with the design of the S-curve undergrounding project. The two pictures on the outside, just to remind you of, the ugliness that we have up in the air there. And picture in the middle is what it's going to look like, more or less, when it's complete, where we have none of that in the air. CPC is the consultant that's designing that for us. They've really stayed on schedule. Did I mention that our staff is doing a real good job keeping our contractors on schedule? And so they are humming along, putting together. The survey work is complete. They've flown aerials of the area, and we've actually made our first deposit to FPL for FPL to start their preliminary design. So real proud of the schedule that we're keeping on that project as well. Smaller projects that we have in the CRA, of course, include Art in the Park. We had our first Art in the Park in October. We had a follow-up one in February. Been sidelined us for having a subsequent one, but we did also concurrently have got art exhibit City Hall in the foyer area. COVID got this project too. Those are no longer there. However, today we sent a virtual art gallery to our public affairs office, and we will be hosting got art virtually online until things change where people can look at art in person again. We held a very successful Ocean Way holiday in our special events funding. Community policing, thank goodness we've had that funding. Typically up our community policing expenditures around March for spring break. We had no need for community this March, but thank goodness we have those resources, because I was able to redirect some of those resources to Captain Brinlow's staff to up assistance with crowd control and public safety issues, especially in the S-curve area the past couple of weeks. And that's been a real good resource for us to have at our beck and call. Please recall you allow us to have a small budget each year for landscaping. These are some smaller trees that we planted along A1A using that small landscaping budget. And then advocacy this year, as Mr. Rack spoke in his discussion about the bus shelter project, he didn't take a lot of credit for all the work that was done behind the scenes to get the bus shelter approved, as he showed it to you. When he says that Broward County wanted 2 buses to park there, and we said no, and we said we wouldn't do the project if there was, had to be room for 2 buses. And so one of the things that you should know that your CRA staff does behind the scenes is advocate for conditions and for approvals and designs that reflect the way we want things and not necessarily the way that things are typically done. We really try and fight things that reflect the unique nature of the barrier island and the Cove area. We published our annual report, which was distributed on time again. You should have all received a copy of that annual again in your weekly update. This annual is a statutory requirement. We disclose what the CRA takes in, what it puts out every year, and it also contains a description of all of our accomplishments for the entire year. This report is also available electronically online. So here's the fun part where we talked about Board Member Drosky when we talked earlier about, what can we afford this next year? This is where we start talking about that. So based on what we know today, we project that the CRA will be rolling over approximately $2.9 million from fiscal year 2020 to fiscal year 2021. Based on an earlier meeting this evening, that figure will probably increase by about $80,000. But again, this is just for all priorities. And so these are very round numbers at that point. But with rolling over $2.9 million, we still expect that our tax increment revenue next year will increase over what we took in this year. So we are projecting about $4.2 million in new tax increment revenue to come in. A word about COVID and the real estate market here. We're projecting an increase because, as we experienced in the last downturn, it took a couple of years, like a couple of cycles, taxation cycles, for any lowering of the tax rolls to hit the tax roll, in fact. And so we anticipate that our tax increment revenue will still continue to increase, at least for certain, for the next fiscal year. So next year we'll be looking at $7.1 million that's available to the board to spend on various projects. Again, as you know, the first bill that we have to take off the top is the $1 million that we pay in debt service every year. We typically fund programs, as we talked about, the commercial facade program, community policing, public art, those normally funded programs, special events. And so that's the $524,000 that you typically spend on those programs. The $400,000 is what you spend on agency overhead to have a staff to implement projects. And so that leaves you $5.1 million that you must allocate that's available to be spent on capital projects. So we've carried that $5.1 million over. As we discussed before, we are in design of the undergrounding of S-curve lighting upgrades. CPC has told us that project is going to cost approximately $1.75 million. So I've gone ahead and taken the liberty of putting that in your potential funding priorities. And that would leave you then with $3.3 million, almost $3.4 million that you must allocate to other projects. And so this is where your input comes in. As you heard in the last presentation, we have a bus shelter relocation project that's moving along. And if the board desires, we can also add on the cost of undergrounding the utilities along Hillsboro Boulevard to further improve and enhance the aesthetics of that roadway area. That's absolutely achievable with the money that we have available next year. You can see for Sullivan Park, the Sullivan Park facility is a question mark at this point. Remember, I told you that we've just gotten, we're in the request for qualifications process. We plan on bringing a recommended design consultant back to the board for approval at the June meeting. We would get that consultant on board in June, and then start working through a design process for that facility. That person would work with the board to design, what you ultimately want to see there. It's hard for us to really say what that's going to cost because, other than a very rough concept that you approved, we really don't have the full, cost estimate at this point. So that's a large question mark. What we typically do in an instance like this, keeping in mind that we do have a rather large pavilion project that will be finishing up, and then we have yet another relatively large undergrounding project that will be under construction in 2021. We might want to look to our capital improvements plan, the 5-year plan, and make a note on that plan that we are going to start setting aside money for the Sullivan Park facility beginning in 2021 and 2022. And Ashley's going to move us to the 5-year capital plan. And we can come back to any of these slides for discussion, of course. I can't see it. So you can see there are some, I'm going to call them, old projects that remain on the capital improvements plan. We have, so first of all, we have the $947,000. That's what we talked about for the bus shelter and undergrounding option for the bus shelter project in Hillsboro Boulevard. So you can see that in fiscal 2021.
Can we go back to the previous slide?
I'm sorry. Mayor, we just have a little bit of a presentation snafu here.
Mhm.
Here we go. One moment, please. There's a delay, so just click it and wait. I'm sorry about that. Here we go. So then what we, so we talked about the bus shelter and the undergrounding portion of that project. If the board desires then to start setting money aside for the Sullivan Park facility, which would be the next larger capital improvements project, we, depending on other spending priorities, could potentially spend 2021 designing the Sullivan Park facility, permitting it, and then we would of course have enough money banked for that project, depending on the design options that you choose, either to fund it completely in 2022, or if it were more than $3 million, funding it in 2022 and 2023. I don't see us having to go into 2023 to complete the Sullivan Park facility project. $3 million is more than adequate to cover that. But we would be basically putting that entire $3 million in the capital improvements plan that's there should the board want to use it. We have older projects that you see in there as well. Under parking improvements, we still have the purchase of island entryway properties. Those are the motels on A1A. And then of course, a budget for improving those. That's something that's been in our capital improvements plan for the entire time I've worked for the city, for the CRA. So if there are additional capital projects, now would be the time for the board to talk about them so that I could help you with your cash flow and to figure out how we could work those into the 5-year capital improvements plan. So that is the end of my presentation, and I hope that at this point the board would feel free to have a discussion about spending priorities for next year and the years to come.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Maury.
My
Board,
pleasure.
Mr. Hudak, you have your hand up.
Yeah, hello, Ms. Maury. Very good presentation. Quick question. One thing I did not see on there was the improvement in the ballards. Where are we with that project? I know that the ones that we wanted to do were not approved, but there's still, the ballards that are there now are not efficient, and they're falling apart, as we all know. So, and I didn't see that in your presentation. So if you can expand on that, I'd appreciate it.
Thank you for reminding me of that. That's something that falls outside of the first 6 months accomplishments. That will be part of our next 6 months accomplishments. The funding for the bollards, it's our intent to have those funds encumbered by the end of this fiscal year. So and by that, I mean, they will be ordered by the end of this fiscal year. So we don't plan on carrying that money over into next year. So by October 1st, that will be in terms of what the CRA spends on that project, a done deal. We have had our bollard approved by FWC as part of the Kurt Cottrell Pavilion. So we have a green light on that project. Although it's not the dual light that the board wanted, we're told that it will be brighter, and we feel like the public, will really appreciate the additional illumination on the sidewalks there. So it will be done. So it's not part of this budget discussion.
And one more thing, the crosswalks, the 2 additional crosswalks, are they completed already? I haven't been able to go down to the beach lately, so I don't know.
So that contractor asked for an additional 2 weeks. So the new completion date of that project is July 10th, roughly. What we're running into now is that some of our contractors are running into delays because of COVID. In this particular case, the contractor had delays placing the order and getting that order received in a timely manner from the manufacturer.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Did that answer your question, Mr. Hudak? All right. Anyone from the public care to comment on this
Yes, sir.
item? I don't see anybody raising their hand. We have someone from the public?
No, we don't.
I don't
It
see
looks
anyone
like
from the
it's
public. I'm gonna close
Mr.
it to the
Drosky.
pub- Thank you. Mr. Drosky?
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation, Chris. As far as the projects going forward, I have a question, or rather a clarification. So the bus shelter relocation is listed at 423, and then the undergrounding of utilities is 524. Is that 423 plus 524, or does the 524 option, is that the bus shelter relocation with the undergrounding?
The bus shelter project, that's the streetscape improvements that you saw, the A, B, C, D boxes in Mr. Rack's presentation, plus the bus shelter and the bus bay pullout. That's the $424,000. Yes, the undergrounding is the additional $523,000.
So it's closer to 950,000.
Correct.
Okay, so that's almost $1 million of the 5.1 that we have to allocate.
Correct.
So I would like to see that project go forward. And in addition to bank the rest towards the Sullivan Park expansion. I don't want to lose sight of the potential acquisition of the motel properties to the entrance to the city on A1A there, but I don't think that's a priority now. I think moving forward with Sullivan Park is the priority in front of us, and I would, unless there's something new that comes before us that we're not aware of, I would move forward in that direction, using the $1 million towards the bus shelter project, and then banking the rest towards Sullivan Park.
Okay. My 2 cents on that is I would support that. I don't have an issue with it. The hotel acquisitions with the changes in the environment and the new reality that we're dealing with right now, the situation regarding purchasing those properties may have changed. It might be worthwhile to find out if that's more feasible. And if not, then we move on. But if things have changed, we might have an opportunity there. And I think it's worth exploring. I don't know if you can do that and still have it budgeted the way we do right now.
I can certainly look into it at your request. Absolutely.
Any other board comments? Are we looking for a motion on this at all, or is this just a presentation?
This is just a presentation. The only other item, Chair Gans, that I would just bring up is that, again, based on the discussion you had earlier this evening, the board had previously budgeted funds to help support the 4th of July special event. And I just want to make sure that it's a transparent item for you, because that was budgeted. What I heard earlier in the evening is that we will not be holding that event. The board certainly can keep the money in that line item should another event, be held before the end of the fiscal year. It's always up to the board's discretion about how to spend that money. If you do not spend it this year, that's fine. Like I said at the beginning of my discussion on the budget, the amount of money we roll over to next year would just increase.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Okay, I think we can move on to the next item. Not seeing any other comments.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I believe the Director Maury covered number 4, number 3, and number 4 together. Number 5 is March 2020 Community Policing Report. I know there's a report in the backup. Director Maury, are you looking for discussion or presentation on this item?
No discussion. I just wanted to point out, we listened to what the board said on that. I think when you review that report, you will see that there's greater compliance with the deputies staying within the CRA. Captain Brimlow has done an outstanding job working with his staff. They're all, the people that do work this detail are not must review a CRA map and make sure that they are familiar with the CRA boundaries. So I think that we have addressed that concern.
Okay.
I apologize. I also just want to reiterate that at my direction, we've allocated additional community policing dollars to provide additional security in the CRA over the past couple of weeks in response to some security issues having to do with COVID.
That's great. Thank you. Board, any comments? Okay, next item.
Item number 6 is the April 2020 change order report.
Thank you, Anthony. That also is something, I just want to bring to your attention again for complete transparency. I'm required to report to the board all change orders that are authorized. These, as you can see, are mostly having to do with the Crooked Trail Pavilion. And if you have any questions about them specifically, Mark, our capital projects manager, is here to help in case I can't answer the questions. But I hope you would agree that they're quite small in scale, and I can assure you that they're all been very necessary in order to accomplish that project and do it right.
Okay. Board, any comments? Anyone from the public care to comment about this item? I don't see anyone. Okay.
Okay, we are now at the public input portion of the CRA agenda. Persons addressing the board shall state his or her name and may speak for 3 minutes unless extended for 1 additional minute by the chair. No comment should be made related to the personal life or personal qualities of any person. No language which would offend the ordinary sensibilities shall be permitted. Madam Clerk, if you could just advise for those who have called in or Zoomed in, how they may go about raising their hand or being recognized for the public input portion.
If you're attending via Zoom online, at the appropriate public comment period, click raise hand at the bottom of the participants tab. If you are attending via Zoom by telephone, press *9 to raise your hand.
Heather, do we have anyone who's written in?
No, we did not.
Okay, I'm not seeing anybody coming forward in the public. I'm going to close it to the public. Okay, board comments?
We're at administration comments.
Oh, I'm sorry, administration
Sure.
comments. My apologies.
I have no comments, Chair.
Board comments.
Mr. Hudak?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. The one comment I do have is that I would like to see the funds that have been earmarked for the 4th of July celebration kept where they're at. I am hopeful that we will have some type of celebration once this is all over, as I think the city does need it. And so I would ask that we keep the funds there and available so that when we do have that opportunity, we have the funds available should we decide to move forward with something.
Excellent. That's a good point. I don't see any other board members raising their hand right now, but Mr. Santucci, you have yours up.
I do, Chair Gans, and thank you for recognizing me. I do have a couple of comments there. I'll provide them with the caveat that COVID does not care whether or not we're in the CRA or within the city. And so I do have some updates that I would like to share for the group as a whole. First and foremost, I want to let the board know that the school board has made a decision to not allow for summer school activities in any of their schools this year. And I know that information, every municipality was waiting on that in order to make some decisions regarding their summer school. So I provide that with you as a decision was made by the school board today. Additionally, I sat in on the Broward County Commission meeting that took place today at 11 a.m. where they discussed the reopening of businesses to a limited degree, getting us in line with the rest of the state of Florida and what you've probably heard Miami-Dade and West Palm Beach discussing. So I fully expect that order from the county will come out sometime this week. And I know that they have had a lot of input from various stakeholders. I say that to say that it does not include the beach. The beach was not in that discussion at this time. And thirdly, the phase 4 of the CARES Act has been brought before Congress, and they are set to vote for that on Friday. As it stands now, it does include some kind of relief funding for local municipalities, which the previous disbursements did not. So I will keep you up to date on what those funds may be and what they can be used for once we get to the bottom of the legislation, should it pass as it is today. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other board members want to comment before we look for an adjournment? Okay, not seeing any. Looking for a motion to adjourn. Anyone? Everybody's muted, Heather. It's hard to.
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you.
Second,
Commissioner, Mr. Hudak, sorry, Vice Chair Parnas seconds. All in favor, say aye.
absolutely.
Aye. Meeting adjourned. Thank you.
See you gentlemen next Tuesday.
Yes, sir.